what's been saving me over the past 2 days has been all the lovely, wonderful discussions on Twitter, on Reddit, everywhere on the planet regarding Tyler Myers versus Troy Stecher. And we can thank the Halford and Bruff show on Sportsnet 650 for just throwing down some gasoline, leaving the match, and then walking away. Because their poll
Well done.
question, who would you rather have, Troy, Troy Stecher or Tyler Myers? And I loved the animosity, the rage, all the people being like, it's Stecher and it's not even close, or it's Myers and anyone picking anyone else is a fucking idiot. Like, just so aggressively angry. And some of the tweets that are just like, well, if you ignore salary, like, yeah, you'd take Myers. Or if you ignore his height, yeah, Stecher. Like, some of the takes were so funny. And it's
Can
just
I
like,
just say this is why I love Canucks Twitter?
oh, yeah,
Like
it's amazing.
it is June. We have
Mhm.
barely been out of the season for like what, 2, 3 weeks since the Canucks last played a game.
Yeah.
And people are already people are already starting to ask the question like Tyler Myers or Troy Stecher. Let's do this. Let's have a massive civil war about
Giant
this.
discussion about it. And it's like,
And this is why I love the fan base sometimes. Just the fact that we like people don't ever tell me that Canucks fans aren't like passionate about about this team like ever, because oh my god, there are so many better things we could all be doing. But in a certain way, is this not the thing you want to be doing right now instead of something else? Like, oh my god, yeah, it's been an interesting couple days to say the least.
well, also because like on the note of the whole like Canucks fans, like they're real ones and they're like insane, and that's why you love them because they're passionate, right or wrong. Like it doesn't really matter. And this is why I kind of was like, don't give the people protesting Jim Benning on like a 28-degree weather Saturday. Don't give them shit for protesting what they feel is a really poorly run team. Like whatever,
Yep.
who cares? It has no bearing on you, your appreciation or unappreciation of the team. They're obviously passionate enough to do something that's absolutely ridiculous. There
And
was
that
one
doesn't
guy wearing
and that
jeans like on a 28-degree day, like you know,
Yeah, and that doesn't take away from your passion necessarily. Like if that's
no,
not your thing, that's not an indictment on your interest in the team.
no,
It's just not.
not at
You
all.
can which is why it's more important that, you when people do that sort of stuff, you don't like, immediately just dump on them.
Yeah,
They're passionate in a different way. There are different paths to fan interest. And there's kind of a question in line with that. I think later in the
yes,
show
there is
that we can get into. I think we'll leave that one to the end though, because it's a bit
for
of
sure.
a thinker. But like, yeah, that's the way this fan base is. Sometimes we decide that, you know what, it's a nice warm day. There are very nice things. We could be out on the porch actually meeting with people again, because we're allowed to do that now, kind of, to a certain extent. But instead, I'm going to talk about whether Tyler Myers, despite his contract and his many, many, many flaws,
Yeah,
is somehow better than Troy Stecher.
and
Uh,
do you want to actually get into the debate of who you would rather
sure,
choose? Because I
sure.
don't think I think I made it pretty clear like earlier in like the season when like the season was going on, like I didn't really have time for Myers' defensive play. I don't think he is frankly a good defensive defenseman. But at the contract they're paying him, you would expect him to have some kind of semblance of defensive play that isn't just like flail to the ice and hope things work out. You would hope you get a lot more for $6 million a season for 5 years.
Yeah, I mean,
That
six
being
million dollars
said,
is that's essentially first pairing
yeah,
money. Like
yeah,
most, like in fact, there are probably a lot of first pairing defensemen who don't make $6 million,
no, like they're
who make less than that probably.
they do deploy him like minutes wise like a top pairing
pairing
defensemen,
defenseman. But that's
but
more
they're
out
not
of
getting the defensive
necessity,
value. Are you
and
kidding me?
that's more out of necessity than out of because they want to. Like a good
Yeah.
team would not be playing Tyler Myers 22 minutes a night and would have no reason to.
No, and like we're gonna get into this team a bit in a little bit, but the Winnipeg Jets moved off of Tyler Myers because they knew they would have to pay him a lot, but they knew that he had very specific value to them as a puck moving, goal scoring like producer, but you had to shelter who his competition was because when he ate a lot of minutes against really elite competition and he wasn't alongside like an elite partner, he struggled. And we saw that with the Canucks for the last 2 years where, he's holding his own and doing like his best, but like Myers Edler was a disaster in the first season. This season, Myers and whoever it was on the left side was a disaster. Like, yeah, he puts up points. He's very good at finding a way to score at the NHL level, and that's good. But for $6 million, you would hope he could hold his own in both ends of the ice. Obviously, the Canucks need the goal scoring anyway, so like they're kind of like, well, it's a wash. We need some
Yeah.
kind of offense from the back end, so like whatever, because they're not getting it out of Schmidt, they're not getting it out of Ben, they're not getting it out of Ulevy, Chatfield, like Hamonic even, like they weren't getting offense from anyone. So the fact that they got however many points out of Myers, as far as they're concerned, they're like, well, $6 million, kind of worth it, whatever. But Stecher's value, obviously, as like an actual like very solid defensive defenseman, even in spite of his size, his work ethic was like unbelievable, and that's kind of what you want in your system on the right side in your bottom pair. Unfortunately, the Canucks didn't see it that way. They said, "Oh, we can't afford to pay a very good defensive defenseman to play on our third pair because we're not there yet because our cap situation sucks. So we're just going to pay Travis Hamonic to be our only good defensive defenseman." And
And even
look how
he's
that worked
kind
out.
of just okay. And even like as an actuality, like to be fair to Travis Hamonic, I think he actually like exceeded some of our expectations really
Yeah,
from what he was capable of doing, which is good for him. It's just still not enough. He just it's still not enough for what you need. I'm
yeah.
glad you took the route of being of the sensible route here because I'm gonna go in a little bit of the unhinged route a little bit
Oh yeah,
here.
baby. Do it.
So, people are like, well, Troy Stecher can only play like third pairing. He's a specific role, sort of thing, right?
Sure.
And Tyler Myers, whereas Tyler Myers can play, in different parts of your lineup. It's like, okay, sure, but how? And again, I already asked the question, like how much is that for the Canucks anyway? Is based out of necessity rather than out of because this is the considered the best possible option, right? And the thing that bothers me the most about this situation is that people are looking at it in a vacuum. They're looking at specifically person, how is he doing, like basically like ISOCAM kind of thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, when I'm like, it's the idea of like, say when people are comparing Troy Stecher and Tyler Myers, they're kind of looking at them each in a vacuum where they're just looking at them and they're not focusing on the rest of what's going on the ice while they're out there, right?
Sure.
Troy Stecher, when he's out on the ice, can make things easier and does his job well, does the role that he plays well, and makes his team and helps his team win games based on what he is capable of doing, and what he does in that set role. As specific as it is, he's very good at that. He does
Yeah.
not. You don't have to worry when Troy Stecher is out on the ice. Tyler Myers, on the other hand, literally is a black hole. Like every single time he is out on the ice, you are concerned, and not only that, you're also pretty sure he's gonna make the teammates around him worse and make their lives harder. Like when was the last time? When was the last time on that in Tyler Myers' time as a Canuck, which I know has only been 2 years, but when was the last time that you looked at one of Tyler Myers' defensive line mates, defensive pairings, like the guy playing alongside him, and was like, wow, him playing with Tyler Myers sure made him better. Like, sure improved his abilities and made him a better hockey player. I can tell you, most likely, there isn't one. I cannot remember a player that actually benefited from playing with Tyler Myers. In fact, last I remember talking about Tyler Myers and his defensive pairings, I remember him blaming Olli Juolevi because Myers had a bad read.
That was so bad.
Throwing a rookie under the bus because a rookie player, as you know, as maybe regardless of what expectations that Juolevi hasn't lived up to, Myers, you're the veteran. It is your job to be responsible on the ice if you're mentoring a young guy. And we've had this conversation before where I've talked about, I don't want him playing with Quinn Hughes because it's going to make Quinn Hughes development that much harder. I don't want him playing with Jack Rathbone because it's going to make Rathbone's development that much harder. So what do you do with him? And he's not trustworthy enough to play on a third pairing shutdown role because that's not his thing. So what do you do with him? He's the only thing. The only place I would want him is in the press box. I don't want him in my lineup in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter what kind of money he's making. Maybe it matters in the sense of, okay, I would feel more comfortable putting him as my seventh defenseman if he were, say, only making $1 or $2 million. You wouldn't be, but that's kind of the thing. That's why the contract matters in itself, is because he's making so much money, you have to make it work. Because there's no chance you're getting rid of it. So you have to make it work, and that means you have to play him, more or less, even if better options become available. The Canucks, in this case, don't have any better options, so it kind of balances out. But also, again, how much of that is due to the fact that they're paying Tyler Myers $6 million? If they manage their cap better, and I say this all the time, if they manage the cap better, we don't have to have the conversation of whether Tyler Myers or Troy Stecher or Travis Hamonic is better, because they could have had all of them. They could have had all three of them, and they could have made that decision on the ice rather than in hindsight, where it's so much harder to make that call. So I don't know what people want here. It's very clear to me that Tyler Myers is not an NHL defenseman, and yet we're paying him like he's a first pairing one, which is just asinine. He should be a seventh. He could maybe be a seventh pairing in a pinch, but he should not be playing regularly.
Pairing. He's the 14th.
Seventh pairing. Seventh defenseman in a pinch, but he should not be in your roster playing 82 games a year by any stretch of the imagination. Unless you really want to change who that third pairing is and what partner you give him, and specifically go out and buy a partner, like a free agent partner, for him that can be that responsible when playing alongside him, because they don't have it right now. And that's not... No. And it shouldn't be on Rathbone or Hughes to basically be carrying this guy, to be carrying a guy who is making a lot more money than both of them are. And Hughes probably is going to want more than him. And will deserve more money than Tyler Myers is getting right now. So, I don't know why we're having, I know why we're having the conversation, and it all revolves around the fact that, again, they didn't offer a contract to a very solid, smart, young defenseman in Troy Stecher, and partially that was because they couldn't, because Tyler Myers is making way too much money for what he does. He shouldn't, it's very clear that Stecher is the better player in terms of what he brings on a nightly basis, and more importantly, what he brings for his teammates when he's on the ice, whereas Tyler Myers is the chaos giraffe, as Wyatt would put it, and that means that every other player has to work a lot harder just to make up for the fact that they have no clue what the hell one of their teammates is going to do when he steps out there with them and makes their lives tougher.
Well, it's also a case of... I love your rant, by the way. It's very fatalist. I love it. It's very up my alley. It's weird that I'm actually listening to your take, and I'm you're being a little mean to Tyler Myers, okay?
I think Tyler Myers seems Tyler Myers seems like a nice guy, and this is nothing on the guy. Although I didn't like the Juolevi thing.
No, that was pretty.
That was a bit of
cowardly,
a that's a cowardly thing to do when you're a 30-year-old defenseman and you're dumping on a kid, and you're dumping on the rookie, on a guy who's played 20 games. Like,
Yeah.
that's not good, especially because it doesn't seem like you're helping him get better in any way, shape, or form by
And
doing so. It's
I
like,
believe I believe on that play too. If I remember correctly, he tried to carry the puck up ice, threw the puck away, and then it resulted in a 2-on-1 the other way, and
and he
Uelevi
just
was
kind of,
already like pinched up, and so he had to defend the 2-on-1. Myers like raced back, got like kind of in the way while sliding, and they still scored. And it's like, you're really gonna give your D partner rookie like shit for like you fucking up? Like, you fucked up. Just be like,
yeah,
yeah, shit
you're
happened.
the you're
Or
the
I don't
you're the
remember the
veteran.
play.
You should be owning when you make that mistake. That's on you. Have to own up to it yourself. You can't be
Yeah.
you
But
can't be
he's
throwing one of like you can't be throwing a teammate under the bus. Like whether or not like people think Oliu Levy is an NHL defenseman or not, like you can't, regardless of who it is, you can't, if you're the older guy who's been in the NHL for what, 12 years at this point, like, or 10, like 10, 11 years, you cannot throw your young rookie defenseman who you're supposed to be nurturing as you're out there and insulating as the older veteran. You can't be throwing him under the bus for a mistake that you made and caused. Like, that's like, and that in itself just plays into the fact that Stecher is a better defenseman, in the sense of like, you don't have, if I put Stecher with Jack Rathbone or an Oli Uelevi, I wasn't really worried that he was going to like make their jobs tougher. Like, I didn't feel like that was ever a worry with him. Yes, sometimes he makes errors. He is a third pairing defenseman on most teams, and that's fine. And that's fine if that's what you want him for that role. But I also wasn't going to worry about him if I had to throw Rathbone or Hughes or someone else with him, because I knew he'd be able to carry the fort sometimes, or they'd
well,
at least communicate a little better.
here's the issue, right? Is like, Tyler Myers is an offensive defenseman, and you'd expect with someone like with his, experience in the league, that he would have some kind of semblance of a defensive game.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the only Canucks prospects they have on D are all puck moving offensive defensemen.
So
Rathbone
he's
is Rathbone
irrelevant.
isn't a stay at home guy. Quinn Hughes obviously is not a stay at home guy. Like, even like some of like the random dudes that they picked up like in free agency, like Josh Tevez is not a stay at home guy, and he was
Right.
like spent time in the ECHL because he couldn't really figure out the decision making side that would keep him at least as a relevant AHL defender. The guys that they've picked up like in the draft too, like they're mostly puck moving defensemen that are like big bodies. They're not really the stay at home guy. Like, the only stay at home defenseman they really have in the system is Jet Wu, and he's probably going to take 2 to 3 years before he's actually like relevant to the Canucks decor. And so
And he's
for
capable of
Myers'
being pretty
sake,
good, so that's not nothing. But
well,
yeah,
you'd hope. I
yeah,
mean,
that's the
there's no guarantee. Like, he could completely fan out. Like,
well, sure. But
prospects
let's
fan out
let's
all the
say
time.
based on the potential expected of Jet Wu. Let's say that he meets
Sure,
that potential. He's expected to be okay. Like, he's expected to be decent.
sure.
Like,
Like, best case scenario, he is a 4 on your right side, which is what they need. Worst
yes,
case scenario is he cannot figure out how to score consistently at the AHL level, and the Canucks have their doubts, and then trade him away for another Matthew Highmore. Like,
right.
that's the kind of logic that this regime would have. But anyways, like, I just want to quickly sum up the whole Myers Stecher thing, because I don't want to go spend 40 minutes talking about a player that just frustrates the hell out of both of us. Um, the whole issue with Myers getting as many minutes as he has just speaks to the inability of the organization to build credible depth on their right side. The right side has always seemingly been an issue after Chris Tanev. Like, they really never had, like, after they lost, God, they lost, who was it?
Like,
Ham Hughes and Bieksa, all I think in the same season, or maybe it was one season for the one guy. Bieksa was the one after that, and like, they kind of lost that
yeah.
veteran,
They traded. I
top
think they lost
four.
Hamus and UFA, and then they traded
Yeah,
Bieksa. Yeah.
yeah. So they lost like the veteran presence, like where they could like bring in like other puck movers on the right side and then kind of like figure things out. Instead, they lost all their veterans, and every single guy they brought in afterwards to try and fill the void of like the bottom two pairings have been pretty bad. except for Troy Stecher, who was actually very good and useful to them, and they said
Yeah.
goodbye. So now,
Yep.
as you know,
They're stuck again.
Guys like Harmon Dial, guys like Thomas Strantz, like everyone's pointed out, the Canucks need to radically change their decor in a year when they do not have the money to do so. And because they don't have the money to do so, you're going to see a situation where a player like Tyler Myers is probably going to be played with Jack Rathbone again next season, even though they didn't really gel whatsoever
They're
down the
not a good
stretch
fit.
in this
They are
season.
not
They're
a
not a
good
good
fit.
fit. So they need some kind of idea or like play where they get a stay-at-home left shot defenseman for the left side to stick Myers on the third pair. And if Myers, like, ignoring the contract, if he's producing 30 points as a third pairing defenseman because you've improved your second and first pair right side, you're looking pretty good.